Hello, and welcome to another episode of Busch Funeral Homes on Compassion and Community. I'm Jim Busch, President and owner of Busch Funeral Homes. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Meghan Burmeister, who's our location manager for Avon Lake, Avon, and Fairview Park locations. So welcome, Meghan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Today we're going to focus a little bit on the educational standpoint of what we can do for cremation options. And since more and more families have been selecting that, I understand. And so why don't you just tell me a little bit of the history of cremation and then some of the things that you're doing to help families celebrate a life with cremation ultimately being the final disposition.
Sure. I could talk about cremation for hours, so I hope you've got a lot of tape here. Cremation has been around for a very long time, but it started gaining popularity in the United States in probably the 1920s and was really caught on fire in the 1980s when it started in New York and California, started to move into the mid-America and the Midwest, and now we're currently at about an 80% cremation rate in the Cleveland area. Busch is very beneficial to the communities that want cremation in that we have 2 crematories to serve families, and I find that is such a gift to the families that we serve because their loved ones come into our care and stay at Busch until the cremation is completed. We've got a lot of options for families that choose cremation. It can be as traditional as a burial funeral with the deceased being present in a casket, going to church, and then instead of going to a cemetery, going to the crematory. And once their cremated remains have been returned to the family or to the cemetery from the crematory, you've got endless possibilities for what you can do with your cremated remains.
So why don't you talk a little bit about those endless possibilities? You know, when you were sitting with the family, sometimes they'll say cremation, but they don't know that that's just a part of, the final disposition and how they're going to actually handle their loved one. But all the different things that they can have with cremation. So you mentioned, going to church, having a service with cremation to follow, but cremation can follow beforehand, if I understand too.
That's right.
Why don't you just share a couple of the different things when families sit down and they don't know what they can do when they're thinking cremation?
Yeah, that's a really good point because so often families come in and think that there can't be a lot of ceremony when there is a cremation, and that is the opposite of how it is. We could take a person's urn to a church and have a memorial mass at a Catholic church. We can take a person's urn off-site and have a service in the metro parks with them. We can take somebody's cremated remains and divide them so that every member of the family could have a small portion in a keepsake urn. We can place cremated remains into jewelry for the family. We can be very traditional and take cremated remains in an urn to a cemetery and have earth burial for those, or place them in a columbarium, which is much like a mausoleum for cremated remains. People can be made into stones these days. People's cremated remains can be blown into glass, and you can have a sculpture with your loved one's cremated remains showcased in your home. We have urns in my Remembrance Center in Avon Lake that are in a clock. So I've had a family purchase those for a family member that was always late. So they placed his cremated remains inside a clock. I have keepsake urns that are small enough that you could sit with them and hold them to your heart so that you can be as close to your loved one as you need to be sometimes when you're mourning their death. We have urns that are teddy bears, and we have urns that are made for scattering. So that's very nice if you want to scatter cremated remains on your personal property or take them into the lake out the 3 miles that are required legally for you to do that. You can place cremated remains in a biodegradable urn, and they can go right into Lake Erie, where you can mark their point of entry into the lake with your GPS. We also can send an urn home with someone, and they can sit on your bedside table. They can sit on your mantle. They can be I have people that often place them on the kitchen table so they can kind of carry on everyday conversations with their loved ones that they're missing.
Okay, so there's endless possibilities is what you
Really
share.
endless possibilities.
So I know you mentioned just a little bit ago about the Remembrance Center, and it's something that we pride ourselves at Busch is to have these Remembrance Centers for families to come in to see everything you just described
Right.
in real time, in person, so they can see it. So tell me a little bit about the Remembrance Center. You kind of gave a big picture of the different things that are in there.
Sure.
But can they come see it?
Sure. Anybody is welcome to come to the Remembrance Center. If you call our office, we can schedule an appointment for you to come in. If you drop by luck, we might be able to
Okay.
to give you a tour. But in the Remembrance Center, going beyond cremation, we have the opportunity for people to look at headstones, to look at flowers. We have a close relationship with Sisson's florist in the community, and they do such a nice job for us. To look at printed material like prayer cards and stationery sets that people would use at a memorial service or a funeral service. Outer burial containers like vaults, our casket selection, and then we get into our cremation selection where we have cremation caskets that are available, urns that are available, the option to turn your cremated remains into a diamond if you want, various jewelry options for you, bracelets, rings, charms, necklaces, all that can hold cremated remains so that you can have your loved one with you all of the time. And then again, the blown glass option and the parting stones where your cremated remains can be turned into rocks that you can take with you when you travel, leave somewhere special. It's really interesting.
Very creative. Mm-hmm. You know, I think what I'm hearing too is endless possibilities.
Yes.
A lot of education though too, like you just dropped in something a few minutes ago where we're fortunate, we sit on this beautiful shore of Lake Erie, and people think they can just go down to Miller Road Park and, scatter their loved one, not so.
Not so.
You need permission. I know you need to go 3 miles offshore. So one thing I recognize is that you really do just help educate people of all the options.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I certainly do tell them it's illegal, but I leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Because one of the things I kind of want to leave for the families, that are able to watch this today, is the creativity that you and your staff have, and you've been a big part in leading that. I'll never forget walking into the funeral home and seeing, the main chapel, and it can be set up as formal and as traditional and as religious as we need it to be, and yet it can be transformed into another type of event space. And so the day that I walked in, you actually had the centerpiece of the room, you had the urn with a beautiful floral wreath around it, and then you had catered tables set up for about 64 people, if I did my math correctly. But the whole event was, she was the center, she always held the holidays, and the whole event was going to be that we were going to have a meal, and Mom was her last center of attention.
That's right.
At that meal.
That's
And
right.
I just was like, okay, that took some creativity and listening to your family. So you have anything else that you'd want to stand? Because that takes a family that's receptive to it,
Right.
but also incredible listening that you and your team are doing.
Well, I think that is definitely part of it. When we are working with a creative family, that's a boon to us for sure. But when we sit with them and we talk about their loved one, it's so easy to see what was important to that life and what that life brought to the ones around them who cherished the person that we're honoring. So having a meal makes a lot of sense, and we are really able to provide that both in our Avon Lake, and Fairview Park funeral homes by bringing in tables and having folks break bread together and share memories together. And like you said too, it can be as religious or non-religious as people want. Sometimes I found lately that some folks have grown away from a church that they visit, weekly, and instead we have a less denominational service, a less religious service, but it's still so celebrational of the life. It means so much to the family to honor their loved one, and we really just try to garner as much as we can from the conversations that we have with them in order to show the value of the person whose life we are honoring and making it nice.
Listening to you, we have the privilege to work closely together, and I always admire how you lead your team. I keep hearing education, and I just think over and over at time. So, like religious education, for instance, the Catholic Church doesn't want us to divide cremains. Those are
That's right.
those are meant to stay whole, one body, right? So some of these talk to me about why pre-planning is important. Because obviously we're giving this creative element.
Sure.
So can you maybe close us with just the value of why you believe in pre-planning for cremation families? Because there's just so many options.
Absolutely. So one thing for sure is that if you want your family to have the ease of taking care of your funeral arrangements without the concern of the price, you can prearrange your funeral and pay for everything, current day pricing, for your death in 20, 25 years. So that's the first one, is taking the financial burden off of your family and also letting them know exactly what you want. Mm-hmm. You can choose your flowers, you can choose your urn, you can choose your casket, you can let them know exactly where your burial site is, who you want to officiate at your service, if anyone, your playlist. All of this can be done when you sit with your pre-need advisor. Our pre-need advisor in Avon Lake and Fairview Park is Julie Skinner, who is one of the smartest people that I know. She's a close personal friend of mine, and she just has such a vast knowledge of the entire funeral industry and all of the options and opportunities that are available to people, and can really help with that. When we get back to the Catholic Church and the dividing of cremated remains, she will certainly let a Catholic family know about that. She will also reassure a Catholic family that since Vatican II, the Catholic Church stands behind cremation. And I want Catholic families in our communities to know that as well. I've cremated a priest before who I had the honor of serving, so wow. I definitely want that to get out there. But you can't really miss with prearranging your funeral. It makes so much sense. It takes the burden off of your family. It lets everybody know what you want and sets your ideas in stone.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being here with us today to share on this vast topic, because it sounds like that there are endless possibilities.
For sure. Thank you.
And I also think that, what a sweet invitation to just offer folks to stop by.
Anytime.
I know you prefer an appointment, because you never know.
You don't.
When we're serving a family. But, that offer to come tour and see all these endless possibilities on site at our Remembrance Center.
Yes.
Would certainly be helpful for the community. So,
yes.
Meghan, I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jim.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.